I'm not a guy who usually pays too much attention to the small stuff. Bills, Anna handled those. Groceries, she had a system. Savings, well, that was supposed to be our nest egg. I trusted her with all of it. But then I started noticing something that didn't sit right. It began small, like 50 bucks here, 100 there. I figured it was just her grabbing extra groceries or maybe buying something for the house. But when I logged into our account one morning to pay for my buddy's bachelor party trip, I saw that a few $100s had disappeared overnight. I'm not talking about some big purchase. I mean ATM withdrawals, a few hundred here, a few hundred there, all adding up to thousands over a couple of months. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I'd miscalculated. Maybe I forgot about some bill or subscription. So I asked Anna casually over dinner, "Hey, did we pay for something big recently? Feels like the savings have taken a hit." She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, yeah, I needed to pay off some credit card stuff, groceries and gas." It sounded reasonable. I nodded, but something about her tone bugged me. She was too quick with the answer, too casual about a few thousand bucks disappearing. Still, I let it go. You don't marry someone and expect them to lie straight to your face, right? But over the next few weeks, the money drain kept happening. And every time I brought it up, her answers got vaguer. "It's for the house," she'd say, or "I had to cover some things for work." I started tracking the withdrawals, jotting them down on my phone late at night while she slept. The amounts were random, $200 here, $500 there, but they always happened on Fridays. One Friday evening, I decided to test something. Anna had told me she was meeting her friend Lisa for drinks. I gave her a kiss goodbye, told her to have fun, and then waited 15 minutes before hopping in my car. It felt ridiculous, like I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I parked across the street from the restaurant where she said she'd be, my hands gripping the steering wheel like I was on some spy mission. About an hour later, I saw her walk out, but not with Lisa. She was with some guy I didn't recognize. He was tall, dressed sharp, and way too touchy for someone who was just a friend. My chest tightened as I watched them laugh and head toward his car. I didn't follow. I couldn't. I just sat there, my stomach twisting in knots. This wasn't just about money anymore. Something bigger was going on, and I needed to figure out what. The next day, I told myself to stay calm, to think this through before jumping to conclusions. I decided to check her phone. I'd never done that before. Didn't think I'd ever need to. But desperate times, right? While she was in the shower, I unlocked her phone using her birthday. Bingo. There were messages from a guy named Mark. Not just a few messages, hundreds of them. Dates, plans, inside jokes, even pictures of them together at places she'd told me she was running errands. One text from last week stood out. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Don't forget the cash." My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the texts. This wasn't just some emotional affair. She was funneling my money, our money, to this guy. That night, I confronted her. I didn't wait for the perfect moment. As soon as she walked into the living room, I held up her phone. "Who's Mark?" Her face went pale, but she quickly recovered, her voice dripping with fake indignation. "Why are you going through my phone?" "Don't. Just answer the question," I said, my voice steady, despite the rage boiling under the surface. She hesitated for a second too long. "He's just a friend. He's been helping me with some financial stuff." "Financial stuff?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been helping yourself to my savings and handing it over to some guy you're sneaking around with?" Her eyes darted to the door like she was thinking about running. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of your stupid hobbies, I wouldn't have needed someone else." I stood there, stunned. She wasn't even denying it. "You're unbelievable," I said, shaking my head. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer, just grabbed her purse and walked out the door without another word. I stood there, staring at the empty space she left behind, feeling like my whole world had just imploded. After Anna stormed out that night, I sat in the living room for hours, staring at her phone in disbelief. I kept scrolling through the messages, looking for answers, but all I found were more lies. She wasn't just taking my money, she was using it to wine and dine Mark. Fancy restaurants, expensive weekend getaways, even gifts. The more I read, the angrier I got. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. The next morning, I called out of work and went straight to the bank. I froze all the joint accounts and opened a new one in my name only. The banker gave me a pitying look as I explained the situation, but I didn't care. My priority was cutting Anna off before she could drain anything else. By the time I got home, I felt a small sense of relief, like I was finally taking control. But Anna came back later that afternoon, acting like nothing had happened. She walked in with her usual confidence, dropped her purse on the couch, and started scrolling through her phone. "What's for dinner?" she asked, like we hadn't just had the biggest fight of our lives. "Dinner?" I said, standing in the doorway to the kitchen. "How about we talk about the thousands of dollars you stole from me instead?" Her face hardened. "I didn't steal anything. It's our money. Or did you forget that when you married me?" I couldn't believe the audacity. "You've been using our money to fund your little affair with Mark. Don't act like you're some victim here." She rolled her eyes like I was overreacting. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Mark's just a friend." "Right," I said, pulling out my phone and reading one of the texts aloud. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Don't forget the cash." Real friendly. Her mouth tightened, and for the first time I saw a crack in her armor. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "You know what? Maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable, I wouldn't have needed someone like Mark." That was it. I was done. "Get out," I said, my voice calm but firm. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your stuff and get out. We're done." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You can't just kick me out. This is my house, too." "Actually, it's not," I said, holding up the deed. "My name's the only one on it. And before you try anything, I've already frozen the accounts. So unless you plan on paying rent, you've got no reason to stay here." Her face turned red, and for a moment I thought she might explode. But then she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and awkward conversations with mutual friends. Most of them took my side, but a few tried to play neutral, saying things like, "Well, you know how Anna can be." I didn't care. I was just focused on moving on. Then came the final blow. A week before our divorce was finalized, I found out she'd accessed an old savings account I'd forgotten about. It was the one I'd been using for years to save up for a dream vacation. She cleared it out, every last cent. When I confronted her through my lawyer, she smirked and said, "Consider it compensation for putting up with you." At first, I was furious. I thought about suing her, dragging this mess through court, but the idea of spending more time and money dealing with her made me sick. Instead, I let it go. I figured the money was the last tie she had to me, and I was ready to cut it. Once the divorce was final, I sold the house. It was too full of memories I didn't want to keep, so I took the profit and moved to a new city. Starting over wasn't easy, but I found a decent apartment, got a new job, and threw myself into hobbies I'd neglected for years. I took up running, joined a local basketball league, and even reconnected with some old friends I'd lost touch with. One night, I got a call from a mutual friend who told me Anna and Mark had broken up. Apparently, he'd been cheating on her with someone else. I laughed, not out of bitterness, but because it felt like poetic justice. The guy she thought was so much better than me had turned out to be a bigger liar than she was. Looking back, losing Anna was the best thing that ever happened to me. Sure, she took my money, but she also taught me a valuable lesson. Happiness doesn't come from holding on to people who don't value you. I may have started over with less in the bank, but for the first time in years, I felt rich in the ways that truly mattered.